Hello, innovative teachers. I am John Francis O. Season from 324B Sci Physics, and for today, we will be learning about the ADDIE model. Planning instructional material may be overwhelming at first. As we perceive its importance in the teaching and learning process, the list of what ifs might be long along the way. However, we can step forward easily with the guidance of Instructional System Design Model, and for today, we will focus on the ADDIE model. The ADDIE model stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and Evaluation, where each phase requires intensive consideration of learners' need for developmentally crafted materials sufficient in an efficient and flexible instructional plan. Before we detail the framework, let us first recognize the Florida State University's Center for Educational Technology, which is an institutional proponent of the ADDIE model that spearheaded the design primarily utilized to train effectively the military in the 1970s through systematic preparation of guidelines and instructional materials. This model was initially developed to integrate military training projects by the U.S. Armed Forces. Although revisions had been made to make it more smooth and more interactive than the hierarchical version, it remains to be methodical and leading learning design methodology in the field of education. Let us take a closer look at the five phases of the ADDIE model. Since this is a linear model, we must take note that each component is transcendental to one another, and we must also account for each step accomplished before moving on to the next. The first step in this framework is to analyze. This fundamentally important phase requires problem identification and developing a sound solution. This component should determine the characteristics of its target audience, such as their existing knowledge and skills, language proficiency, and motivation. The characteristics of our target audience, particularly our learners, would help us, teachers, essential decisions through the ADDIE process. In doing analysis, we must also take into account the instructional goals, which contain the competency gaps and desired outcomes of the students. Completing the analysis is the utilization of appropriate resources and their respective delivery methods. Some of the outputs of this phase include needs analysis and task analysis. A successful analysis will lead us to the design phase, which aims to align learning solutions through objectives and strategies with instructional goals. In order to widen and strengthen the instructional foundation, the teacher must ensure specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound learning objectives, as well as logical and progressive instructional and testing strategies. Next in line is to develop the learning system being planned. In this step, the teacher must be able to gather and integrate content and strategies supported by various media pertaining to learning resources that will guide the learners and other instructions as well. The developed learning materials will be also subjected to critical validation for appropriate review and revision, as well as pilot testing to gather insights, observations, and feedback regarding their effectiveness and to assess whether final adjustments should be made. After developing the material, it is the time to implement the learning solution through adequate engagement and preparing a conducive learning environment. This involves communication after enrollment and orientation of the developed learning materials to the students, which is also enhanced by supplying instructor-led preparation trainings to determine schedule and qualified learners. In other words, this phase aims to the execution of the transfer of knowledge in different technology and media outputs that will benefit the efficiency of delivering the instruction to all learners, such as providing hardware or software applications. The fifth and final phase of ADDIE model is evaluation. This would assess the quality of learning resources planned and implemented in the earlier stages in order to reach the instructional goals. This is composed of two subphases, which are the formative and summative evaluation. In formative evaluation, the prior implementation is assessed to identify the quality of learning, which should satisfy the standards established in the design phase, while the summative education should be conducted after implementation, generally identified into learners' perception, learning, and performance. Overall, we can say that ADDIE model encompasses a learner-centered approach in ensuring the quality of education that perpetuates critical thinking and innovation as the center of learners' development. The other models, such as the Assure and DID, focuses on product-based outcomes, whereas learners in ADDIE model are analyzed depending on their learning needs rather than requiring them to be output-oriented. In other words, Learners are nurtured in ADDIE model through empowering their strength as the center of instructional design and using it to manage quality learning. That's all for today, and thank you everyone for listening. Have a great day ahead.